Their laughter didn't just echo in the hallway, it carved a hollow space right in the center of my chest, proving exactly where I stood in this family. "You will simply never reach your brother's level," my father said, wiping a tear of mirth from his eye. That sound hurt worse than any physical blow. For 5 long years, I had silently transferred funds to keep the electricity running and the pantry full in that very house. Yet in their eyes, I remained the failure, the shadow that couldn't compare to the light. So I stood up, my knees weak but my voice resolute, and dropped the bomb. "Fine, then tell him to cover the costs. I am finished. The checks stop today." My mother froze, her glass halting halfway to her lips. "What checks? You haven't sent a dime." That was the precise second the air left the room, and the dam of my patience finally burst. But before I unleash the rest of the story, I need to know who is standing in this corner with me. If you're out there, just drop a listening in the comments, or tell me what city you're watching from. It means the world to know these words are finding a home. Sometimes a digital connection is the only proof we have that we exist. Thank you. Now, here is the truth. If this resonates with you, please subscribe to Winds of Thought. Every sub amplifies the voices of the forgotten. I'm Rowan Vale, and this is the story of how the Invisible Man finally cast a shadow. The crystal fixtures above the Royal Plaza Ballroom shimmered, casting judgment on everyone below like silent sentinels. 200 of the city's elite filled the space, groomed and glittering, all there to canonize him. My brother, Dr. Levi Vale, the newly appointed prodigy of pediatric surgery at Mercy Ridge. I occupied a folding chair at table 24, wedged against the swinging kitchen doors. Every time a server barged through with a tray of appetizers, a gust of stale air hit my neck. It was the perfect metaphor for my life adjacent to the warmth, but never allowed inside the fire. I had returned to Phoenix after a 6-month absence, only because Mom sent a text saying, "Stop by if you aren't busy." It was the kind of invitation you offer a plumber, not your offspring. Levi, naturally, was the gravitational center of the room. He stood bathed in the track lighting, nipping hands with hospital donors, his laugh practiced and melodic. He wore his status like a second skin. From the shadows, I watched Mom spin in the champagne-colored dress Levi had supposedly purchased, boasting to anyone who'd listened that her son was a savior. Dad stood guard next to her, chest puffed out. Neither of them registered my arrival. The announcer's baritone cut through the jazz quartet. "Let's give a warm welcome to the star of the evening, Dr. Levi Vale." The applause was thunderous. My pocket buzzed against my leg. It was Claire Newen, my executive assistant at Redwood Stratton Holdings. The message read, "Rowan, the board requires your authorization tonight on the $500,000 grant for Mercy Ridge." Mercy Ridge. I stared at the glowing pixels, my thumb hovering over the lock screen. That irony was too rich to process immediately. Levi's face was now projected onto the massive screens behind the stage, smiling alongside grateful patients and senior doctors. Mom grabbed the microphone, her voice cracking with theatrical emotion. "Levi is our pride and joy. He is the one who cleared our debts, who showed us the true meaning of generosity." The guests clapped, faces full of admiration. Somewhere in my gut, a tether snapped. A woman seated next to me, smelling heavily of jasmine and money, leaned in. "Your brother is a saint. And what is your line of work?" I offered a tight, thin smile. "I manage figures." She tilted her head, offering that specific brand of pity reserved for the mundane. "Sensible. Very sensible. ... I raised my water glass. Sensible enough to wire $3,000 every 30 days for half a decade. While my parents never looked at me with a fraction of the adoration they heaped on him, I swallowed the water and watched Levi soak up the ovation that my bank account had purchased. They labeled him the family's pillar. If they only knew whose back was actually bearing the weight, the music would stop instantly. And tonight, stopping the music was starting to sound like a plan. Back in my Austin penthouse, The floor-to-ceiling windows framed the Colorado River, a ribbon of dark glass. The city was alive with noise, but my office was dead silent, save for the fan on my laptop. I pulled up the ledger. 60 identical rows, the 10th of every month. $3,000, labeled Mom and Dad RV. 5 years back, when Dad's retirement fund evaporated and Mom's gallery went under, I stepped in. It wasn't a charity, it was a tax I paid for their affection. Levi had volunteered to handle their finances, so I routed the cash through him to keep things simple. I never whispered a word of it to anyone. I recalled a Sunday phone call from Mom, her voice chirping through the speaker. Levi covered your father's prescriptions again, and he's treating us to a weekend in Santa Fe. I had forced a cheerful tone. That's fantastic news. I didn't mention that Santa Fe was paid for with my forfeited vacation days, or that their kitchen remodel had consumed my annual performance bonus. A month later, Claire had flagged the transfers. You keep your family life so private, Rowan. Why the massive outflows? I kept typing without pausing. Because if I stop, they lose the roof over their heads. And because sometimes the check is the only way they remember they have a second son. At first, safety was enough, but invisibility is corrosive. It turns from a shield into a cage. Every time Mom lauded Levi's responsibility, every time Dad toasted him as the family bedrock, the resentment crystallized. Then, on a mundane Tuesday at Redwood Stratton, I was approving quarterly philanthropy decks when a familiar name popped up. Mercy Ridge Medical Center. I stopped breathing. It was Levi's employer. I signed the initial pass, thinking it was a fluke. 2 hours later, HR verified the contact. Dr. Levi Vale is the lead applicant for the Mercy Ridge grant. A cold sweat broke over me. He wasn't just taking my money. He was latching onto my company's charity arm, the very fund I controlled. He was leveraging my professional reputation to elevate his own. Once again, I was the hidden machinery, making him look like a golden god. I shut the laptop, staring at my distorted reflection in the black screen. For years, I convinced myself that staying hidden was noble. But staring at those 60 transactions, I faced a brutal fact. Maybe they didn't see me because I was too busy propping them up to stand tall myself. That night, as city lights blurred like data points on a corrupted file, the math was broken. Not the finances, but the emotional calculus, and deep in my chest, a fuse was lit. The drive out to Sedona always dragged. The desert landscape was a monotonous burnt orange under the relentless sun, smelling of sage and dry earth. I had sworn to visit for the holiday, even though the script was already written. Levi would be the sun, and I would be the debris orbiting in the dark. The childhood home smelled of roasted beef and floor wax. Mom had set the table with the good silver and the crystal goblets I had purchased for their anniversary. Gifts attributed to Levi, no doubt. Levi leaned against the sliding glass door, pontificating about his upcoming project. We are revolutionizing the pediatric wing, he said, oozing charisma. I pulled some strings to get the funding locked down. Dad raised his glass. We are in awe, son. You've carried this family, the loans, the gallery debts. You held us together. He pivoted to me, his voice dropping an octave to a patronizing register. And Rowan, how is the number crunching? Keeping busy? Easy enough, I replied, voice flat. Still making those monthly transfers. The table erupted in polite, confused laughter, assuming it was dry wit. Mom dismissed it with a wave. Levi, remember the water bill is due. You've always been the dependable one. Unlike your brother, always burying his head in spreadsheets. I gripped my fork until my knuckles turned white. Claire, who had joined me for moral support, squeezed my hand beneath the tablecloth. Her eyes held a mix of fury and sorrow. I didn't react. I had spent a lifetime digesting these insults. After the meal, as the sky turned a bruised purple, the group migrated to the living room for pie. Levi and I were left on the deck. He swirled his wine, gazing at the horizon. "You don't have to try so hard, you know," he said, casually dismissive. "Mom and Dad just need a hero. You know how they operate." I looked at him, exhausted. "They don't need a hero, Levi. They need the truth." He laughed, a low, easy sound. "Truth doesn't pay the mortgage." "Maybe not," I said, "but it collects eventually." He paused, his smile faltering for a fraction of a second, then turned back to the window. "You always were too sensitive." When I got back to Austin, a letter was sitting on my desk, a formal acknowledgement from Mercy Ridge, addressed to Redwood Stratton, referencing Dr. Levi Vale and signed on behalf of Rowan Vale. My blood ran cold. I read it 3 times. He hadn't just borrowed my influence, he had impersonated me. That was the note I decided the silence was finished. The Royal Plaza looked like a dreamscape that evening. Golden light spilled everywhere, violins played soft waltzes, and glassware chimed. I was back at table 24 near the service entrance. The poetic justice was sharp. Every waiter bumping my chair was a physical reminder of my rank. Close enough to serve, never important enough to sit. The MC's voice boomed. "Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Levi Vale." The spotlight hit him. He smiled, crisp and confident. On the projection screen, a montage played Levi in scrubs, Levi shaking hands, Levi between our parents at Christmas. I stared at the photo. I had taken that picture. Naturally, I was behind the lens, unseen. Mom joined him on stage, radiant in her pearl gown. "Levi is our miracle," she declared. "He funded his father's treatments, renovated our home, and sent us on that dream trip to Santa Fe. He is the reason we sleep at night." Applause rippled through the hall. A whisper from a nearby table drifted over. "Must be nice to have a son like that." Another replied, "Some families win the lottery." Dad bellowed from across the room, "We are blessed with a son who honors his family, unlike those who just count beans." I set my glass down hard. The clink cut through the immediate chatter. I stood up. My heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird, but my voice was steady. "And tell him to pay the bills," I said, projecting my voice, "because I am done. The money stops now." The room froze. Every neck craned. Mom blinked, her smile wavering. "What on earth are you saying?" she tried to chuckle. "What money?" "The $3,000 I have wired every single month for 5 years, I stated clearly. "The mortgage, the chemo bills, the kitchen remodel, all of it." I produced my phone and turned the screen outward. 60 transfers, memo line for Mom and Dad, RV. For a heartbeat, the room was a vacuum. Mom stammered, There must be an error." Levi said he handled those transfers. "Check the bank app," I said softly. She hesitated, then fumbled for her phone. Her face went ghostly white. $547, she whispered. Dad grabbed the device. "Impossible." He scrolled frantically, eyes bulging, as he saw the outgoing stream of cash, all funneling to an account named Vale Private Ventures. Levi's smile became a rictus of panic. "That's an investment vehicle. I was compounding the money for them." "How much did you lose compounding it?" I asked. He didn't speak. His knuckles were white around the microphone. My phone buzzed. A text from Claire: "The hospital board is present. They just congratulated Levi on the Redwood grant." Of course. The grant I was supposed to sign. Mom tried to salvage the dignity of the moment, her voice shaking. "Rowan, let's discuss this at home." "No," I said. "Not this time." The silence was heavier than lead. Dad looked at Levi, confusion morphing into dread. "Levi, explain this." Levi lifted his chin, trying to summon his charm. "It is a misunderstanding. I will clarify everything later." I took a deep breath and locked eyes with him. "No, you will clarify it now. You have been siphoning the funds I sent to support them, and using my corporate identity to advance your career. Tell me, brother, How much of my existence do you plan to hijack before you stand on your own 2 feet? He opened his mouth, but sound failed him. I remained standing. The atmosphere in the ballroom crystallized. The spotlight that had glorified him moments ago now made him look washed out, diminished. I sat back down, vibrating with adrenaline. He was at the summit tonight, I thought, but soon they will see whose shoulders constitute the mountain he's standing on. The ballroom dissolved into a hive of whispers. People stretched to hear the conflict. The band had ceased. Even the staff were paralyzed against the walls. The pristine gala was unraveling, and Levi's facade was fracturing. I walked toward the stage. You claimed you invested it. Why are the transfers going from their joint account to your personal checking? Levi let out a strangled laugh, trying to calm the herd. Rowan, this is inappropriate. You are causing a scene over a clerical error. I held up my phone. Shall I cast the bank statements to the projector? Would that clear up the clerical error? Gasps echoed. Phones were raised to record. Mom was weeping at the front table. Levi, say something. He straightened, eyes darting for an exit. The market turned, he blurted. I lost some capital. I intended to repay it once the portfolio rebounded. It wasn't some, I cut in. You lost nearly everything, and you forged statements to keep them ignorant. The air grew thick. Dad shoved his chair back, the screech piercing the room. Enough, he shouted. This is your brother's night. Do not ruin this. I met his glare. I'm not ruining anything. I am simply reclaiming what was stolen. Before Dad could retort, a man in a charcoal suit stepped forward. Pardon me, he said, looking between us. Graham Whitmore, St. Mary's Board. You are Rowan Vale, with Redwood Stratton? I nodded. Perhaps you can assist, he said, his tone serious. Dr. Vale informed the board that your firm approved a $500,000 grant for Mercy Ridge. Is that accurate? Levi's jaw locked. That grant, I said, is pending, and for the record, I am the sole signatory authorized to clear it. The reaction was visceral. The crowd murmured, voices rising in disbelief. Levi's mask slipped entirely. He looked sick. Another figure stood, Dr. Felicia Moran, the hospital director. Mr. Vale, she said, her voice sharp. Are you stating that the funds Dr. Vale announced were never secured? That is correct, I said. If you were promised that capital, you were deceived. The murmur swelled to a roar. Levi shouted over the noise. He is lying. He is jealous because I built a legacy while he hides behind spreadsheets. I walked until I was directly below him at the stage edge. You want to discuss titles? I said, holding my phone up to the mic stand. I am the Chief Financial Officer of Redwood Stratton, the entity you have been using to dazzle this room. And if anyone doubts it, I can dial the CEO this second. Silence swept the room like a cold wave. Levi froze. Dr. Moran stared at me, waiting. Mom's sobs were the only sound. You wanted to spotlight, Levi, I said softly. Here it is. Let's see how you look when the light hits the facts. My phone buzzed. Claire again? Evelyn Hart is on standby. Your call. I looked up, feeling the weight of 200 pairs of eyes. You wanted to be seen. Now they are watching. I unlocked the phone and hit speaker. Evelyn, I said, I'm in Phoenix. There are questions regarding the Mercy Ridge grant. Her voice came through crisp and authoritative. Rowan, I'm in the boardroom. Who is listening? About 200 people, I replied. A pause. Proceed. The room held its collective breath. Can you confirm who holds final veto power for all Redwood Stratton philanthropic endeavors? You do, Evelyn said. Rowan Vale, CFO. Why? The silence was electric. I looked at Levi as her words reverberated. Because my brother, I said, informed this hospital he had already secured the cash. He lied, and effective immediately, Redwood Stratton is rescinding the offer. Levi's voice cracked, desperate. Rowan, don't. You aren't just hurting me. You're hurting the program. Those scholarships are vanishing because you lied, I said. Not because I told the truth. He shook his head frantically. You can't dismantle everything I built. I'm not dismantling it, I said. I'm relocating it to where it belongs. I turned to the audience. Redwood Stratton will redirect the $500,000 to a new fund, the Vail Scholarship, for financial integrity. Full rides for accounting students from marginalized backgrounds. People like me. Graham Whitmore whispered. He just pulled $500,000 in real time. Mom cried out, Rowan, stop. You are tearing this family apart. I faced her, my chest tight. No, Mom. This family broke the day you chose a comfortable lie over your own son. Behind her, Dr. Moran addressed the room. Effective immediately, Dr. Levi Vail is suspended, pending an inquiry into his dealings with the board. Mercy Ridge demands absolute integrity. Levi slumped, as if his skeleton had dissolved. He looked smaller than I had ever seen him. Dad's face was purple with rage. You did this out of spite, just to prove you are superior. I looked at him for a long beat. No, I said gently. I did it so I could stop purchasing your love. I did it so I could breathe. The cameras were rolling. The room exhaled. Levi fell to his knees beside Mom, who clutched him with trembling hands. I turned to the exit. From the back, a single, slow clap echoed. I turned to see Claire, eyes shining. I didn't smile. I just exhaled, a long, clean breath. For years, I thought justice was a complex, distant concept. That night, I learned it was simple. It was a voice refusing to whisper, a phone call ending a lifetime of quiet. As I walked out, leaving the shattered applause behind, I understood what freedom sounded like. It wasn't loud. It was the sound of finally being heard. The ballroom hadn't cleared. The air was thick with tension. Levi stood nearby, pale and sweating. You destroyed me, he rasped. My career, my name. You realize what you've done? I looked at him. You destroyed yourself, Levi. I just turned on the lights. Dad slammed his hand on a table. Enough. You have humiliated us. We will never forgive this. Mom's mascara was running. You turned a celebration into a tragedy just to feel important. My voice remained calm. No, Mom. I did it because I was finished being invisible. If I hadn't spoken tonight, you never would have heard me. Dad shouted. You are nothing but a cold calculator. You think money makes you worthy? I met his gaze with a tired smile. No, Dad. I am worthy because I exist, even if you never saw it. A murmur went through the crowd. Then a nurse from the back shouted, If he paid the bills, he has the right to speak. Heads turned. Expressions shifted from shock to sympathy. Graham Whitmore stepped up. Mr. Vail, just to confirm, the grant is dead? I nodded. Under current leadership, yes. If the administration changes, I will reconsider. Dr. Moran stood tall. Dr. Vail is suspended. The investigation begins now. The announcement landed like a hammer. Levi collapsed into a chair. The crowd waited. I turned to Mom. I didn't want him ruined. I just wanted the truth. The truth hurts too much, she sobbed. Because we buried it for too long, I said. I walked out. The night air in Phoenix was dry and warm. Behind me, the muffled chaos faded. I stood in the parking lot, surrounded by streetlights. There was no triumph, just a clean, quiet emptiness. I had exposed everything, yet I felt peace. Silence had been my way of protecting them. Breaking it was the only way to save myself. 3 months later, Phoenix had moved on. The news of Levi's fall was old gossip. His contract was voided. His marriage ended. I returned to Austin and buried myself in work. One morning, Claire placed a cream envelope on my desk. Mercy Ridge, she said. New board. They want to pitch again. I looked at it. then set it aside. "Decline," I said, "but send my regards for their fresh start." That evening, I flew to Sedona. The house looked tired. Weeds choked the porch. Inside, it smelled of dust. Mom sat on the sofa, hands clenched. Dad stood by the window, avoiding me. They confessed Levi had borrowed $200,000 in their names and lost it. Foreclosure was looming. I listened, expecting anger. I felt only fatigue. "Rowan," Dad said, voice small, "you are the only one who can fix this." "I will," I said, "one last time." Mom looked up, hopeful. "I will clear the mortgage," I said, "but only if we attend family counseling for 6 months. No more lies. If we can't be honest, we aren't a family." Mom hesitated. "Your father doesn't believe in therapy." I met her eyes. "Then he can believe in eviction." Dad was silent for a long time. Finally, he nodded. 6 months, he muttered. 6 months later, we sat in a beige office. The therapist asked, "If Levi was the success, what is Rowan?" The question hung in the air. Dad stared at the carpet. Mom swallowed. "He is the one we owe everything to." I turned to them. "You don't owe me. Just see me." Mom took my hand, weeping. It wasn't pity this time. It was recognition. A year later, I stood on a stage in Austin. Behind me, a banner, the Vail Foundation for Integrity. 100 scholarships for the invisible kids. Mom and Dad sat in the front row, quiet and proud. I spoke into the mic. "They say accountants are invisible. Maybe. But the world stands because of the invisible ones. The ones who hold the beams when no one is looking. I used to think my value depended on being seen. Now I know it comes from facing the truth." After the speech, my parents handed me a wrapped frame. It was my college graduation photo, the one I thought was lost. "We kept it," Dad said softly. "We just forgot to look at it. Thank you for the reminder." "How is Levi?" I asked. Mom smiled sadly. "He is in rehab in Tahoe. He sent this." "Stop." She handed me a note. "I was wrong. You did what I couldn't. Thank you for stopping me." I walked out into the dawn. The sky was a pale orange over the lake. Family doesn't need perfection. It needs honesty. They said I'd never be as good as my brother. Maybe I wasn't supposed to be. I just needed to find my own frame. And now, I was finally in the picture. I have replayed that night 1,000 times. The glass breaking, the look on Levi's face. Was it right? I told myself it was justice. But justice, when it involves blood, leaves scars. We are taught that family is unconditional. But family can wound you with surgical precision. They know exactly where to press to make you feel small. The betrayal isn't the hardest part. It's realizing how long you accept it just to keep the peace. For years I was a ghost. I paid. I showed up. I clapped for someone else. I thought if I gave enough, I'd earn my spot. But love built on silence is just a debt. And debts always come due. A night at the Royal Plaza wasn't about ego. It was about choosing reality over approval. It was saying, "I am here," when everyone wished I wasn't. That isn't heroism. It is survival. When you're the invisible one, speaking up feels like violence. It feels selfish. But it is the only way to become real. Truth doesn't break families. Lies do. Truth just removes the masks. My father believed success meant keeping your head down. I think success is looking in the mirror when everyone else looks away. We live in a curated world. Perfect jobs, perfect kids, perfect posts. But perfection is a performance. It is a mask we wear to avoid judgment. The real work is dropping the mask. Sometimes that means walking away. Sometimes it means loving them from afar until they learn to love you without conditions. Forgiveness isn't amnesia. It is choosing peace over poison. Returning to Sedona wasn't revenge. It was closure. I needed to stand in that house and take a full breath. And when they agreed to therapy, I learned that change starts with willingness, not apologies. They didn't become different people overnight. They just stopped running. Maybe every family has a quiet accountant, the one who tracks the sacrifices, the unspoken thanks. Maybe one day, that person closes the ledger, not out of hate, but out of self-respect. That is what I did. I closed the book. I hope this story offers perspective, not pity. You do not have to pay for a seat at a table where you are invisible. You do not have to prove your worth to those who refuse to look. Love that requires silence is control. If you are the quiet one, the one holding it all together while others bow, I see you. You are the reason the world turns. But even foundations need rest. Even the supporters deserve support. When you stop being invisible, it won't feel victorious immediately. It will feel lonely. It will feel like you broke something. But give it time. You are clearing space for truth, for real connection. Standing in that ballroom, I thought I had lost it all. Looking back, it was the first time I owned anything. My voice, my name. I am not the perfect son. I am not the idol. But I am the one who learned that being seen isn't about applause. It is about honesty, especially when no one claps. So if you are keeping the peace, ask yourself, whose peace is it? And is it worth your soul? Because when you speak up, the world rearranges itself. Some will leave, some will stay, but you will finally stand on your own ground. That is healing, not a parade, but a quiet reclamation. Maybe that is what family should be, not a performance, just truth, even when it shakes. If this story found you when you felt unheard, remember silence is not loyalty. It is a voice waiting to be found. Speak, even if you tremble. You don't owe anyone your silence. If this touched you, if you saw a piece of your life in mine, stay with me. Drop a comment below. Tell me where you are. Knowing someone understands is the first step to healing. And if you want more stories of truth and redemption, hit subscribe. It tells the world that our stories matter, that the invisible deserve to be seen. Thank you for listening, for letting me be heard. I'm Rowan Vale, and this was my truth. Maybe life isn't about the applause. It is about the courage to stand where you once disappeared and say, I am still here. Every time we choose truth, we heal. So wherever you are, remember, you matter. Your voice matters. Keep it alive. Because one honest voice can change how a generation learns to love.